Thank you for joining us for this episode of Talking Health in the 406, where we're one community under the big sky. I'm your host, Jennifer Vansickle, longtime healthcare worker turned health educator. And we're going to pick up right where we left off with Jacob Krissovich. And in this episode, we are going to ask some of those questions that maybe you've always wondered about. How did you cope? Were you still able to, with work or life in general, were you just adapting as fast as you could? Or did you need to take a couple months off and try and mentally just regroup? Or what were you doing with your mental health and life at that point?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. At first I was so busy with adapting and trying to keep my head above water with work and being a dad because, and a husband, your life doesn't stop for you to adapt and learn. You either keep up and do your best or you wallow. And everybody handles, a situation like that differently. For me, I was like, I need to keep my job first and foremost to be able to help provide for my wife and kids, because I was like, I could go on disability, but when I looked at the payments I would have been receiving, it would have meant having to make sacrifices like potentially selling our house and things like that, and I did not want to do that. In my mind at that point, with where I was in my mental health, I didn't want to do that to my wife and boys.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I know now, being more healthy, that it wasn't me doing anything to anybody. It was just a part of life. But with that, I used that as fuel, and I reached out to Blind and Low Vision Services. And so anyways, what they were able to do, since I was a state employee in their state agency, was they were able to come give me a consultation, which was great. They came over to my workplace. They showed me the tools that I could use. They told my employer what I needed, and they gave me some tips and tricks. And then again, thanks to what I went through as a kid, I had the perseverance to teach myself how to use these programs, research it online, watch YouTube videos, fumble through things, and I taught myself how to, use my computer with a screen reader. A screen reader is software that wherever your cursor is on your screen, it tells you what it's saying. So you can use your mouse pointer to move around at first while you're learning, but then ultimately you learn to progress to using just your keyboard because it's way faster, and you learn shortcut keys and all these things. And so I learned how to use that, which I was fortunate in with my vision going. I had time. It wasn't, a light switch, so I was able to kind of use magnifiers and the screen reader at the same time. I learned all these things, and with keeping busy, I was distracted from my mental health and didn't realize I had a problem with anxiety and depression because I was so busy. And I guess at that point I really didn't have a problem because I was so busy. I didn't have time to focus on it.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was so great. They rallied around me, my supervisor, my family, my amazing wife. They all were so supportive. But then as the months go on and you learn these things and the dust settles and it's just kind of more just part of life with everybody, that's when it sank in. That's when I realized, I can't drive. And we had to sell our house and move into town. We got another house, and it actually ended up being a really great move. We're in an amazing neighborhood now, and we have an even nicer house and nicer neighborhood with neighborhood kids and all these things. It ended up being a good thing, but we had to do that so I could take the public transit to work.
Mm-hmm.
And that was hard. I had to deal with that. These things where I'm like, oh, that's right. How do I play sports with my kids?
Right, the classic dad, toss the ball in the backyard.
Yes.
How do you suddenly do that?
Yes.
Yeah.
My wife has to mow the lawn. How do we do that?
Mm-hmm.
I was always the one, I would work on our cars because my dad was a mechanic for 20 years. Cool, we have to pay somebody to work on our car now. Because there's certain things I could do, but there's certain things I didn't feel comfortable because of the safety behind it. If I goofed up, it's the high risk.
Right, right.
And so I started to go into that mourning phase of oh my gosh, like there's things I can't do. And then I started to wallow in the things I couldn't do. And then went through anger and panic attacks, legitimate panic attacks where, couldn't breathe. Just like felt like I just couldn't get a grip. And just the suicidal ideation and all that, and those thoughts where people think, like irrationally, mind you, you think in the dark moment that people would be better off without you, that you're a burden,
Right.
Your family doesn't feel this way, and in no way did my family give me any feeling of that. They were nothing but supportive, but I wasn't rational. I was like, well, of course they're not going to tell me that. They're not horrible people, but I am a burden. All these things, and thankfully, with encouragement from my wife, I finally, again, my amazing, very patient wife, reached out and got counseling, and because I wasn't able to do it on my own. I mean, good for those who can, but I recognized myself that with everything I went through, that I couldn't, and that there was nothing wrong with that. If you break your leg, you're not going to be like, yeah, I'll tough it out. Mental health's the same way. Sometimes you need help, and I needed help, and I went and saw a counselor, and I'm honestly stronger mentally than I ever was. I'm more willing to advocate for myself, which is another thing that I had to learn to do. Is some people, my employer is always willing to help, but some people aren't always willing. So you have to learn to advocate.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Yeah.
It's not natural to want to. It's not comfortable, I guess, to do those things.
No.
So.
And as you tell your story, there's a couple things I think of. I think, thank goodness you worked for a company, the state of Montana.
Yes.
That was willing to support you. And thank goodness you were willing to move into a bigger urban area that had public transit. So much Montana doesn't. And so, it just makes me wonder if you were living in somewhere rural Montana, I won't even name any towns, small town. I mean, this huge lifestyle change would have even been bigger. You would have maybe had to move into Billings because that was the nearest metropolitan area that had a bus that could get you to the grocery store, or you would have had to lean so heavily on families. What do you know what's out there for people like that might be blind or have low vision that are so remotely rural?
I would say that
having advice.
My advice to your question would be, for those individuals in very rural areas, is one of two things. First off, be real with yourself and your feelings. If this is new to you, it's a trauma. It's very much like losing your spouse or something, because it's a very big part of you you're losing. And if you don't think so, I'd encourage you to look deeper, because you may be in a form of denial, because it's hard. It doesn't mean you're not tough to recognize that it's hard. It's just simply hard. It's not something that a lot of people have to go through. In fact, only 2.4% of Americans are legally blind. That's really small. Mm-hmm. And a vast majority of those are in the older category. In older, I mean like 70 plus. And that, so it's just, you're in a small group. So if you're in a rural place, recognize that and be honest with family. Don't feel like you have to go through it alone, because your family's there for you. And if you're not being honest with family, you actually make it harder on your family. I honestly made it much harder on my wife in a very almost selfish way by not being honest with her. I tried to put on a strong front and all these things, and wasn't honest with her when she, knowing me, knew that I was struggling, but I lied. And that's not fair to her, because she can't help it. I'm lying. So be honest with your family members, and then get set up with blind and low vision services as soon as you can. The other thing is, there's 2 organizations for the blind in the state. One's the National Federation of the Blind, and then the other one's Montana Association for the Blind. Reach out to one of them, because blind and low vision services is great for the vocational aspect of it, teaching you how to work and do your normal activities of life. But it's nice to know you're not alone. So if you reach out to one of those organizations, you get to meet individuals and you realize that, it's not over. You just have to learn to adapt what your life looks like. And that's a huge component of it too. And they're also going to be a great resource for more localized resources, like, does your town have some form of paratransit, which is public transportation made for people with disabilities? A lot of times it's destination to destination within city limits, so you don't have to go to a bus stop. And some of the smaller towns do have things. They can also put you in touch with organizations in your town where, they may be able to work out something where they don't do it normally, but they would work out somebody to help volunteer to give you rides and things like that. So.
And are those or do they have chapters around the state?
They do.
Perfect.
Yes. Yeah, they have. They're largely in the bigger cities, the chapters, but they have chapters in some of the smaller cities, or if you know other individuals, they'll put you, or if they have other individuals in that area, they'll have like an at-large chapter, which will cover smaller towns that aren't near a big city.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, you'll be more likely to come in contact with, like, say you're in the northeastern part of Montana. They'll put you in touch with people through that large chapter that are in the northeastern part. Like, due to the fact that everything's so spaced out, they may not have a centralized meeting place, but they do monthly phone calls where you can get on there and talk with people and make relationships, and they can put you in touch with people.
Perfect. And we can put those that contact information on our website as well, the web addresses. Yes. And it seems it's a new chapter in life, definitely, and everybody needs help. And it's amazing with Montana, our tagline in the podcast, we're one community under the big sky. It's amazing how if you reach out to somebody knows somebody that can help. And even, I'm sitting here thinking about even like various disability services. There might be another service or a home service that can help you get your groceries to your house, and there's always people willing to help and reach out too. That's the beauty of our state.
Just learning about things that, I was aware of guide dogs, but I didn't know a whole lot about them, and the whole process was daunting. And through one of those associations, I made a connection with someone who had a guide dog and answered all my questions, and actually came and met with me in Helena, even though we lived in Great Falls, and had to get a ride, because he was blind. And we talked about guide dogs, and without his encouragement, I wouldn't have gotten Fife. And Fife, my guide dog, Fife, is an absolute game changer for me. I go backpacking again. Not just like, easy hikes. I go on some really messed up trails in like the tobacco routes and in the Belt Mountains and stuff, and they're like 10-mile long hikes and stuff, or backpacking trips and stuff. So
that's great.
You also learn about apps that you can use that'll help you, GPS apps that are designed for blind and visually impaired, or apps that'll read things for you, or like you said, services that will deliver groceries. Instacart's a big one. We use that to lighten the load on my spouse, so she doesn't have to always do all the grocery shopping, because I can't help with that. And most people's relationships, especially people with kids, both spouses share that load.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great resource to tap into. That's a great tagline. I like that.
And then I'm curious, for my own curiosity, when you do have to go to the grocery store, or when you do walk into a bathroom, finding the toilet, or in the grocery store, finding you're maybe on a road trip, or no, I don't know. You need a bottle of water, or you need a box of pasta. Yeah. What do you do?
That is actually a really good question. And honestly, the funny thing is that was also part of my journey with my mental health. Was at first, when you're in the very beginning phases, you're not having to worry about these things, because people are like, we'll help with this, that, and the other. But at some point, life has to go on.
And that fades. Yeah.
And that fades. And people are still willing to help, but at some point you have to learn how to do some of these things. And that's when it set in for me. I was like, how do I even do these things? And that's where blind and low vision services come in. Montana Association for the Blind, on their website, you'll see that they offer a summer program where they will is free, and they teach you how to do things like go shopping and cooking and things for me, and those things. For me, I wasn't able to attend it, so I kind of had to fumble through and figure it out. But or talk to people in the association, either association, NFB or MAB, and they can give you some tips, or watch YouTube videos, which is amazing. In regards to shopping, in smaller stores, like if you have, like in Helena, we have a Vans Thriftway, something like that, where if you have somebody who
kind of small, locally owned. Yeah.
Those ones you can, kind of make your way through once you kind of learn the layout, or if you're in my situation where you were sighted and Vans doesn't move things, you like probably in decades, you know where they are, and so you go to some other stores and it was there, but now it's 3 aisles over.
Oh man, yes.
And so if it's a smaller store like Vans, I can go in there and I know where to go, and it is harder with the white cane, but it's doable. That's kind of, you practice and you learn. There's this thing that people aren't really aware of, that your brain learns is they call it orientation and mobility, learning your white cane, which is the cane that you see blind and visually impaired with, and they'll use it to tap or to glide on the floor, and they'll use it for, one, noticing if there's something in front of them, but two, you can hear the sound and how it reverberates off of things and know. But along those lines, there's a thing called time and distance traveled, and you kind of, like, a lot of people think of blind people count their steps, and so I do know some that do, but you learn roughly in your brain on a subconscious level, it takes me this long to get to the elevator if you're walking straight or across your living room. And so with that in stores, you kind of just build a map in your mind of, okay, I want to get chips, it's this far over and it's on the left. And Fife makes it even easier, because as I'm getting close to the aisle, I just tell him, like you kind of noticed maybe when we were walking coming over here, I can tell him preemptively, I can give him a hand signal and just keep telling him left, and he'll take the next left when it's available.
Okay, yeah.
So I can do that, and then once I get into the aisle, it's on me, and what I have to do is, there's an app that's free on your phone that's made by Microsoft that's called Seeing AI, literally, so the word seeing and then the letter A and then the letter I, and it's a free app, and there's two nice features on it. One, there's a text reader where you open up the app and you hold your phone up to something and it'll tell you what the text says on it. There's also a barcode reader, which it makes a noise as you're like rotating a can until you get up to the barcode, and it makes a little happy, like you won the game of finding the barcode.
We all go through that at the self-checkout. We know that game, yes.
Yeah. And when you scan that, it'll tell you, one, what it is, but then also the nutritional facts and stuff like that. And so if it's a short list of things, I can go about it that way. Or if it's a bigger store or if there's more to it, you can go to the customer service desk. It doesn't matter the store. They all have this. And if you live in a small enough town, then congrats, you know the person and they're going to help you anyways.
Right. They probably see you coming anyway.
Yeah. But you can go to the front desk and ask, do you have somebody who could help me? And what they'll do is they'll walk around with you and help you get the items.
Oh, perfect.
Which is even nicer if it's a long, like, shopping list. If it's just you need bread and chips, like, or bread and milk, you can learn those two spots and just go get those things. But if you have to go to Albertson, that's a bigger ordeal. So that's what I do with that. Bathrooms, that was a fun one to learn. Honestly, it's funny. Busier bathrooms are your friend, because, again, you learn to go off of audio cues. So toilets flushing, sinks running, and when you come in, you just kind of pay attention to those things. And as a guy, I just kind of aim for the stalls, because it's a safe bet. Had an embarrassing moment where I tried to go use the urinal and it was occupied.
Oh man.
He was a good sport about it, but after that I was just like, I'm just gonna go stalls because the door's shut or it's open. But you learn those cues. A lot of the times in a lot of bathrooms, not always, but a lot of times there's kind of a standardized layout. You have to learn where the things are, but usually the things are opposite from the bathroom, like the stalls and such. So if it's not busy, then, you know, I just use my white cane at that point. Because Fife is amazing, but I have to tell him where to go, and if I don't know where to go, he doesn't have a built-in GPS like some people think. He's going to be confused. You know, if I'm confused, he's confused. And unless it's somewhere he's familiar, like if it's somewhere we've gone before and I get confused, he can get me to where I need to go. But I use my white cane in that situation, and you just kind of have to explore if there's nobody in there. Also, the other thing I've just learned, and this was hard for me at first, ask. You know, if there's somebody in there, just ask, hey, I'm blind, I'm visually impaired, where's X, where's Y, where's Z? And people are more than willing to help. It doesn't matter where. I mean, Montana people are like tripping over themselves to help you. They're just, you know, but even in other states, you know, people are really willing to help. I've only ran into a couple instances where somebody was rude.
Yeah. Well, and there's so much in life that, you know, you don't think of. We that have sight, like if you're someplace that takes cash only, American cash is not like other countries where the small one is this and the big one is this, you know, and you're sitting there probably thinking, God, I hope I'm giving you a 5 instead of that 50 in my wallet, you know, or something like that. So much that we just can't even start to wrap our minds around, you know. I guess one question I have too is, so, you know, the public health world is starting to say, okay, don't call people with diabetes diabetics. Call them people with diabetes. Yeah. So do you prefer people to say, you know, visually impaired, blind, low-sighted? What is your personal... What should the world... what terms should the world be using? It doesn't matter.
That is a good question. So, and you'll find people have preferences. If you want to go into it with a safe bet, in terms of like the most appropriate current language to use, it's either blind or, you know, if you know the person's actually blind, like totally blind, can't see anything, or the other term would be visually impaired. It used to be low vision. That's still like accepted. It's not like offensive or anything like that. It's not like somebody's going to clutch their pearls and, oh my gosh, you called me low vision. It's just not the most up-to-date. The most up-to-date is visually impaired. And I mean, obviously it's still blind and low vision services, so it's not like offensive. It's just, so a lot of people prefer visually impaired. Legally blind still used. I think people just like visually impaired because it's just, I don't know, legally blind is so formal sounding.
Yeah, it almost feels more like a label or something. Yeah,
it does. Yeah. And the biggest thing is in the blind and visually impaired community, in general, the approach, I don't care, is the people first language of, you know, people who are visually impaired,
right,
people who are blind. Yeah. Personally, I'm fine with whatever. I say I'm blind, because I can't see anything, and to me, blind is not like a dirty word or an offensive word. It is.
Yeah. Well, and I think of like my 4th grader. If he was the one in the bathroom and you said, I'm visually impaired, he'd be sitting there thinking, impaired, and putting that together. Whereas if you just walked in and said, I'm blind, can you point me to the toilets or help me? Do I need to go right or left right now?
Yes.
I could see where he'd get it. You know, just the vocabulary, literacy with that.
And there are some people who aren't completely blind who will say I'm blind in situations like that because it's easier. Yeah. When they say I'm low vision or I'm visually impaired, people will kind of struggle with, well, do you need my elbow? Like, what do you... Oh, sidebar. Since I have a
we love
captive
audience.
Good. If somebody who's blind asks you for assistance, offer them your arm, or ask them, how would you prefer I help you? Either one's totally acceptable. Like, how do you want me to help you, or do you want to take my arm? Don't grab them and start guiding them. It's really, or they use a white cane, don't ever grab their white cane. It's instant anxiety for that person. even with somebody who's doing really well with his mental health, it's you lose your control.
Mm-hmm.
And as a blind individual, see, that shows you person first is it's a matter of preference. As a blind individual, your orientation is your everything. Right now I know the door's behind me, but if you grab me and started to steer me, I can lose where I'm facing, and I don't know how to backtrack to where I was. Whereas if I'm holding onto your elbow, I'm following you like I would my guide dog, and I'm able to keep track of where I'm facing. It's a smoother transaction. I feel what your body language when you're holding on to somebody's elbow, you convey a lot. You don't realize it, but you're coming up to a door, you start to turn sideways because you're aware that person's with you. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of feedback that way. When you start to turn a corner, that person's usually a half step behind you holding onto your elbow, so they can feel that you're starting to turn, or you're slowing down, things like that. Being guided from behind you or somebody holding onto your elbow is really nerve-wracking. So that was my sidebar.
I love that sidebar, and that's and that's great. And we've talked that in Montana, this isn't just young people. This is people who are older. So somebody who's had sight for 60 years, and suddenly they're losing it. And this is applicable to so many ages, so many demographics, so many people. All that is fabulous information, because you just don't know it until you have somebody around you who is blind, or it's now part of your world and life. And so this is great. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Talking Health in the 406, where we're one community under the big sky. And thanks to Jacob for sharing more of his story. In today's episode, you heard him mention blind and low vision services and other great services in the state of Montana. For more information on those and more, visit our website at talkinghealthin the406.mt.gov. And be sure and tune into our next podcast, where we'll introduce you to Fife, Jacob's guide dog. Until then, take care.